Okay, so welcome everybody. Good morning, and thanks for joining. So we are excited for our presentation today. We are going to be talking about compliance for international business and what every exporter needs to know. So some of those discussion points we'll be talking about. We'll also have some Q&A time, hopefully at the end. And this is brought to you today by the Idaho District Export Council and Sarah Massey. And just to speak a little bit about the Idaho District Export Council, we are a group of individuals that our primary focus is to help small and medium-sized exporters to understand how best to navigate and be able to export their business. We do it in a few different ways. And we have a great group of people that are doing it. We're organized under the U.S. Department of Commerce, and our primary focus is to make sure to make it easier for it. I'd like to recognize our sponsors. So our gold sponsor is Banner Bank, and then our in-kind sponsors are Studio Blue and Holland and Hart. So let's talk for a little bit about the people that are presenting and go through that and then get into the show. So my name is Rendy Bell. I am the Director of Sales for UPS for my day job, and then I'm the current chair of the IDEC. I have several years of experience in business development, particularly international growth. I've had served many roles in the community and in the District Export Council, and I'm excited to come to you today. We have also joining us Mitsu Saito, who is the current regional director of the Export-Import Bank. And he serves the exporting community by working with businesses in Alaska, Hawaii, Idaho, Montana, Oregon, Washington, and Wyoming. He's responsible for business development and outreach to partners and exporters within his region to discuss the opportunities prior to finance. And then Mitsu has many years of experience in various international trade roles and freight forwarding. Then we have Jennifer Verdon, who is the acting director of the U.S. Commercial Services and the Rural Export Center. Jennifer has over 18 years of trade and investment experience. She served in various roles involving international business development. She's planned and or participated in numerous global trade activities, such as governor-led trade missions, trade shows, inbound trade buying missions, and many other things. We're excited to have all of these here. We have Ken Kohler joining us, who is the CEO and COO of Advanced Ceramic Fibers. He's a longtime leader in technology commercialization and high-performance materials. His career has spanned roles at EG&G Idaho, Westinghouse, and several startup ventures. Ken brings deep experience in project management, international marketing, and government industry partnerships. Ken will share a firsthand perspective on why export compliance is not just a regulatory obligation, but a strategic asset for growing companies. And last but not least is our presenter, Sarah Massey. Sarah is a globally recognized export compliance expert, trusted consultant, and national speaker with more than 20 years of international business experience. As the president of S. Massey Consulting, LLC, she specializes in export consulting, creating written ITAR and export compliance programs, and training companies to navigate complicated laws and regulations. Prior to that, Sarah was with our Idaho staff for the Idaho Department of Commerce as an international trade specialist, and also has extensive experience in international. So we have a great panel of experts that are here to present. And with that, I will turn it over to Sarah.
Thank you very much, Rendy, and thank you to everybody for joining us today. And also a special thank you to the Idaho District Export Council, because I am excited to work with you for this event, and I appreciate all the support that you provide to the exporting community. As we get started today, I wanted to invite all of our viewers to drop some details about yourself into the chat. You can share your socials like LinkedIn to help us connect with you after the event, but also to help you connect with your fellow viewers if you want to. And you can find that chat button at the top of your toolbar. And we also encourage you to share your reactions during this presentation by using the react button at the top. So this will let the presenters know how you're feeling, what you like. And while those reactions do not show up in the recorded version of the webinar, they're still great for those watching live. So our agenda today is to discuss why export compliance matters and what common mistakes and some costly case studies I've seen, some practical tools and easy compliance wins for you. And then we are going to touch on tariffs. And then we'll also hear from experts again from the EXIM Bank, U.S. Commercial Service, and the Idaho success stories. And we also, of course, want to make sure that you have some resources. And so at the end, we'll give you a few different resources, and SMASI Consulting also has a special offer for you at the end, so stick around for that. And last but not least will be Q&A. So we're hoping to be able to get to 10 or 15 minutes of Q&A today. And so since we're saving all the questions to the end, as we go through the presentation, please drop your questions into the Q&A section. Again, you'll find that at the top of your toolbar. Now, before you ask your question, I do ask you to take a moment to look through the questions that might have already been asked, because one might be very similar to what you have. Additionally, what you can do is click to vote on that. There's a little up arrow button. And so you can vote for questions that you want to hear, and the ones with more votes are more likely to be answered at the end. And we do ask you to ask questions that are available in general to the public in a better fashion, so that it's not super specific. Anything super specific, we're not going to be able to get into on this webinar, because while we are providing information for educational and informational purposes, it is for that purpose only. We aim to share practical insights based on experience in export compliance, but nothing in this session should be interpreted as legal advice. And so anything that is really specific, we're not going to get into at this point. So let's jump in. So export controls exist for many reasons, and the US is not alone in this. We're not the only ones who have export controls around the world. Different countries have their own. And there are several reasons. So national security is one that always pops up, but also economic policies, foreign policies, and even protection of items for short supply or critical items can also be protected. We understand that many times small companies are under-resourced, they're overexposed, and they're unaware of export risks, which is why we are offering this webinar. But I also want you to pay attention to that. It's not just high-tech and defense products that need to be paying attention to export controls. Everything from water bottles to weapons can be controlled. They are controlled for different reasons. The first reason that you're looking at is, what are you shipping? That boils down to your classification. Is it a military item? Does it have some dual use where it's designed for commercial, but also has military applications? Or, maybe not. So, but it's also based on where you're going. The US government has concerns about countries. They can impose sanctions on them or licensing requirements. And so you need to pay attention to where the item's going, as well as who will receive it. Certain organizations and individuals are subject to trade sanctions, embargoes, or other types of restrictions under US law. And those restrictions can apply to both foreign transactions as well as domestic transactions. Yes, domestic. Did you know that there are people in the US that you can't sell to if you know that they're going to export your product? That's because they've been denied export privileges. So you have to pay attention to your domestic sales as well. You also want to know the end use. Many times there are some end uses that are prohibited and others are restricted and need a license. And so these are all the types of things that you need to consider when you're exporting products, even when they're not high tech. So here's a real short example of an EAR99 product. If you know export classifications, that means it's not heavily controlled. But this company shipped twice to an entity that was on the BIS entity list because they failed to screen against the entity list. And then because they missed that, they also failed to seek or obtain export licenses. And therefore, they also mistakenly listed the item as no license required. So usually what happens when you have one mistake, multiple violations can happen. And in this case, it cost the company $35,000, and they were ordered to complete an external audit. So it was 35 plus. So these are the types of mistakes that we want to help you avoid. That's why I'm talking about some of the common mistakes. in my discussions with small businesses, I see several mistakes that crop up time and time again. And so I wanted to bring those to your attention. First, everything starts with jurisdiction and classification. That's key to exporting because these tell you what rules you need to follow for your product. So just really briefly, the jurisdiction speaks to if the item is controlled by the Department of State, which is the International Traffic in Arms Regulations for the ITAR, or if it's controlled by the Department of Commerce, which is the Export Administration Regulations, or the EAR. Classifications start with the ITAR, the top. Those are the most controlled items. That's from the U.S. munitions list. If you find your item there, it's controlled on the ITAR. That's the military items, everything that goes boom and bang, the items that and technology that can hurt us on the battlefield if it falls into the wrong hands. Next down is the export control classification number that you can find if you're looking on the Commerce Control List. So that's on the EAR side. Those are dual use items that the government wants to control to specific locations and for specific reasons. And if you don't find your item on either of those two lists, then you end up in that EAR 99 bucket. So when you classify a product, you have to start at the top and work your way down. The most common mistake I see here is not verifying your classification. Many times companies assume that because they have a low-tech item, that it must be EAR 99, but that isn't always the case. Did you know that shipping a horse by sea is a controlled export? That's right, it has an export control classification number, so you can't jump to conclusions. You also need to watch carefully for things like specially designed. Those clauses can lead your product to be ending up on the ITAR or on the CCL based on what it's designed for. So you have to watch for those clauses as well. Some of the screening mistakes that I see fall into three different main categories here. So the first one is not screening all parties. You need to make sure you're screening for customer, an end user, freight forwarder, the consignee, and also, as I mentioned, domestic parties. That customer is your entity as well as the people that are involved in it. And so you want to make sure that everybody involved in that transaction gets screened to make sure that you know that they're okay to ship to. Another screening is for anti-boycott language. This one gets missed a lot. I think there's a lot of people that don't even know that it exists. So the U.S. prohibits complying with a boycott that is not sanctioned by the U.S. government. So an example of this is if a company puts in a PO that you can't use any inputs from an Israeli company in your product. Now, even if your product doesn't have any inputs like that, you still can't agree to that. You have to make sure that clause is removed from your contract or terms and conditions or the PO or anything like that. And you also need to report that you've received that request. So if you're not screening for anti-boycott language, then you can mistakenly end up with that wording in a contract, and that's a violation. And third up here is not screening for the company ownership. So the Office of Foreign Assets Control, OFAC, has what they call the 50% rule. If a person is on the specially designated nationals list, the SDN, you cannot sell to them or a company that they own directly or even indirectly 50% or more. So let me show you what that looks like. So in this case, at the top of the list is an orange blocked entity. They're on the SDN list and they own a company down the line that's 50% or more. And then that company is blocked. And then that company owns another one down the line, 50% or more. And so they're blocked. And this continues on down the line. So you can see here, anytime that was 50% or more, it's orange and it's blocked. If it's less than 50%, it's not blocked. The kicker on this is that because companies can be created so quickly, that not every company is on this list. So you have to do your due diligence in order to make sure that you know the ownership structure of the companies that you're selling to make sure that they don't have it this far down the line. Maybe the first three are on the SDN list, but the ones down below haven't made it there yet. So you've got to pay attention. And in this example, this shows the indirect. So A and B are both blocked companies. Company C is owned 20% by A and 30% by B. Now, because it is owned 50% or more, indirectly even, that 50% by those blocked entities makes company C blocked as well. When it comes to education, there are 4 common mistakes that I tend to see. The first one is not training your employees to look for red flags. Sales and project managers in particular need to be trained because they are very hands-on with the customer, and they're going to be the first ones to notice that someone is maybe dodging questions about end use or end users or even the shipping destination. I know a company that received an order from for an aerospace de-icing system out of China, but it was from a prohibited end user, and so they said, sorry, I can't sell it to you. Now, 2 weeks after that, they received an order for the exact same product, but from a company out of the Philippines. Now, they caught it because, well, a de-icer in the Philippines, not needed. And so they saw that red flag and reacted to it. So you have to watch out for red flags, but you also need to know what the red flags are in the first place to know what to watch for. The next mistake is not training all staff on export basics. People always think that just the shippers and just the export compliance person need to understand, but the government wants all employees to have a grasp on export compliance. And these topics here are what the BIS considers to be the basics. Something else to be mindful of for companies that are larger and have foreign subsidiaries, for example. So as a US company and US citizens, you have to continue abiding by US export regulations, regardless of where you're located in the world. So if your US company owns a company in France, that company also is a US company and needs to abide by US regulations. Now, when you have products that are not just that EAR 99, the next common mistake that I see is not training employees to understand what a deemed export is. So in the EAR, it defines technology as information necessary for development, production, use, operation, installation, maintenance, repair, overhaul, or refurbishing of an item. So that's a lot of information that can be considered technical information. So it's not just physical things like blueprints, but it also applies to that manufacturing know-how and assembly knowledge. And it can be in written form, it can be in oral form, or it can be revealed through a visual inspection. And when you transfer that type of information that's controlled to a foreign national, so not a US person, to a foreign national, but while you're in the US, it has effectively been exported to that person's home country. So that's why they call it a deemed export. It's because you have deemed it to have been exported by giving them that information. So a license is required when the information that you want to give to this person is controlled to their country. And when you think about the ITAR, all information is controlled. But with the Commerce Control List, you need to double check your classification and double check where it's controlled to know if you need a license or not. And the fourth most common mistake that I see is not staying up to date on regulations. So for example, did you know that OFAC recently extended the record-keeping requirements for sanctions-related compliance from 5 years to 10 years? It's because the statute of limitations for those economic sanction violations was increased to 10 years. Also, the BIS added a list of addresses to the entity list without names, just addresses. And so you need to make sure you're screening names and addresses to see if that gets caught. And another change is the ITAR has been going through some rulemaking changes, and they have new regulations that are going into effect in September, which include differences in classifications on the USML. So these are just a few of the recent changes that you need to make sure that you're paying attention to make sure you don't get caught up. Now, some of the examples here, I'm just going to give you a couple for items that are you can get in trouble for, right? So when common mistakes happen, fines follow. And so let's see what these guys missed so that you don't miss them. First is this company, they missed the OFAC 50% rule. So Aeroflex shipped electronic components to this AAT company, which happened to be 51% owned by a blocked entity at the time. Now, AAT is not named on the specially designated nationals list. Remember how I said that can happen? But they're still blocked under that OFAC 50% rule. Now, as I've highlighted in yellow here, you can see that the company has a very similar name to the one that is blocked. And so when you do your searching on that consolidated screening list, you want to make sure you do a fuzzy name search so that you catch these. The fuzzy names means you're not looking for just a specific exact name. You're looking for something similar so that this can pop up as a red flag and you don't miss it. Now, the consequence of them missing it, they were fined over $87,000 and they were required to overhaul their screening tools and retrain their staff. And of course, this damages credibility and compliance reputation because it's a public statement. Another example for that anti-boycott screening is this company, Streamlight, that participated in a foreign trade show. And during their logistics process, they received and then complied with a boycott-related request from the freight forwarder who asked them to certify that the goods were not of Israeli origin and not from a company on the Israeli boycott blacklist. So this conduct led to 3 different violations regarding furnishing prohibited boycott-related information and failing to report the boycott request. And what was their consequence? They were fined over $44,000. And of course, the public settlement, which causes reputational damage. And in this case, when it was published, the former Assistant Secretary of Export Enforcement, Matthew Axelrod, said the right response is to decline and to report the request. Otherwise, there will be consequences. So let's help you avoid such consequences with some practical tools and some easy ways for some compliance wins. So there's a plethora of online resources, but these are just a few of my favorites. So the first one is the consolidated screening list, which I've mentioned. It combines a variety of lists from different agencies like the Department of Commerce, the Department of State, and the Department of Treasury. Now, when I first started on export compliance, these were all separate lists. They were not combined, and it was painful. So this is a really great tool that they've got available now to make it easy for you. And again, do those fuzzy name searches, as I mentioned. Next, the BIS has recently launched what they're calling a requesters list. So this helps with that anti-boycott request. So this is a list of companies that have been reported as requesting participation in a boycott. So you can compare your potential clients to this list. It doesn't say you can't sell to them. It just is to heighten your awareness of the risk of receiving an anti-boycott request from that potential client. And another tool is called the Wayback Machine. So this is a fun site that allows you to search for a company's website and then pick a date in the past and look to see what the website looked like back then. So this can be helpful in a couple of different ways. So one example is when a company used to have a logo for a client on there, but that client was on the entity list. And when they realized that that was a red flag to American companies, that there was potential diversion risk to that banned entity, they removed that logo from their website. But if you use this machine, you can go back and see that. And another one, for example, maybe they used to advertise that they were selling to the military. And now they hide that fact because they want to not advertise that that's a potential diversion risk as well. When it comes to the regulations, the best resources are straight from the horse's mouth. So for the DDTC, which is the Directorate of Defense Trade Controls, they administer the ITAR. And their website, under the ITAR compliance, and then under how to comply, you can find a lot of resources, including the ITAR compliance program guidelines, which they launched at the end of 2022. They also have a risk matrix that you can use to help identify areas in your company that might be most at risk of potential violations so that you can hone in on those areas for compliance. And they even have some best practices to ensure that you're compliant with transport and things like that. And those are especially targeted for the sea shipments. Then on the BIS side, the Bureau of Industry and Security, they administer the EAR. Under their Learn and Support section, you can discover a bunch of valuable resources and training that help you to navigate through the EAR, such as training videos and upcoming events, some decision tools, as well as guidance on topics like deemed exports, their export compliance program guidelines, foreign product rules, and other things like that. So once you know the rules and you know what controls there are, you also get to be able to say yes with confidence. And you can say yes more. So the more you can make more sales. So, show me with your React button there at the top of the toolbar who wants to make more sales. Because of course, that's what we want to do, right? That's why we're here for export compliance. But for examples of knowing the regulations to help you say yes, I have a lot of companies that are concerned about whether or not they can sell to foreign military because there are some restrictions on military end users and military end uses in the EAR. But the regulations also spell out to which specific countries those apply, as well as what specific products they apply to. And they also define what a military end user is and isn't. So you can know if your proposed sale is restricted to that military end user or not. I also get questions, again, related to military, for people that are concerned that if the military buys their products, that makes their product ITAR controlled. But I also like to remind you that the military buys things like shoes and water bottles. So it's not who buys your product. It doesn't change your classification. So here's a great example. Let's say your company makes slingshots. So now just because someone wants to buy your slingshot to launch a hand grenade, that doesn't make your slingshot ITAR controlled. Now you might want to look into the end user and end use restrictions, but it doesn't change your classification. Also, knowing the regulations can help you say yes more often when you find license exceptions. I found one for an aerospace client that allows them to sell their products to Cuba. As long as it fits inside the specific description as outlined in the regulations, they can say yes. In the long run, you don't need to be a lawyer, but you do need a process. So to help with that process, I definitely recommend as much template-driven workflows whenever possible, because it creates consistency and you're less likely to miss steps that could cause violations in the long run. And of course, while I recommend having a full written export compliance program and manual, having even some simple processes in place can help get you on track. So some things like using those risk matrices that the BIS and the DDTC have, or creating simple checklists for the different types of screenings that you need to complete in order for a customer or a sale. So walking through that export authorization process for accuracy and consistency. And even using Excel logs for record keeping, listing what records need to be kept, who is responsible for them, and then where they're stored can be a good process. Tracking your licenses so you know what licenses you have, when they expire, how much you've used them, what provisos are given, things like that. And also, if you find an exemption or an exception that you can use to not have to have a license, then tracking those is very helpful for future shipments so that you don't have to reinvent the wheel to remember where you were able to find that exception to make it easier for you to ship. And then even visitor logs. So you want to document visitors to your facility, especially if you have controlled items or technology on your facility, and if you have a foreign visitor. Those are especially important. And then for training, having some sort of training template, training guidelines, PowerPoint presentation, the things that you walk through to help someone at onboarding to understand export compliance, but then also for an annual refresher for trainings that keep compliance front of mind for all your employees. Okay, everyone's favorite subject, tariffs. So there's a lot of details out there, and I don't have a lot of time to go into all the details, but I know it's a hot topic, so I wanted to at least touch on some things and resources. So first, breaking news was that yesterday, a 3-judge panel from the U.S. Court of International Trade ruled that these tariffs imposed under the IEEPA, namely the tariffs on Canada, Mexico, and China, to address immigration and drug trafficking concerns and to impose those worldwide reciprocal tariffs, are unconstitutional. And so they're striking them down. The US government is, of course, appealing. And so, stay tuned. And so the best thing that you can really do is to try to follow along. So, again, show me on those reactions at the top of your tab there, who feels like you've been drinking from the fire hose when it comes to export compliance tariffs. And so it's definitely a lot of information coming fast and frequently changing. So hold on to your caps, but here are a few resources that you can go to follow along to try to find that information. The first one is the presidential executive orders, and those, of course, come straight from the White House. So here's the link to that web address. And U.S. Customs and Border Protection, they also have a messaging system that they use to send out announcements. So you can go to their website and register to receive those messages. They also have fact sheets. And so the last fact sheet that was published was on May 20th. And you can find that by going to their newsroom tab, the document library, and then the fact sheet tab. Another good resource is the international trade law firm Sandler, Travis, and Rosenberg. So the website listed here will take you to their newsroom where you can subscribe to receive their newsletter, which also sends out the latest trade and customs news. And they also have a resource page for responding to tariff increases, as well as a list of daily trade reports and advisories. So there's a lot of resources available on the past actions as well as the new ones. One of the questions that I was asked to address today is about how tariffs are affecting exports and exporters. And the effects come from rising costs, from supply chain disruptions, from uncertainty, as well as kind of a variety of other challenges that come along with that. And I have many clients who have expressed to me the difficulties that they're now facing. First, it is rare to find every single component that you need available in the US, made in the US. And so when you can't find those, you import those. And when your costs increase on those imported items due to higher tariff rates, you are faced usually with two options. One is you're either reducing your profit margins or you're passing that along to your customer through increased prices. And when you pass it along, it can make your product less competitive, both domestically and internationally. Additionally, we also see foreign nations reacting to those tariffs by placing their own tariffs on US goods sold into their countries. And again, this increases the costs of your products into that country and, of course, makes it potentially less competitive there as well. So I'm going to touch on just a few ways that you might be able to find a little bit of relief, particularly on the import side, assuming the tariffs come back, if they're not completely struck down. But in general, understanding tariff relief, because some tariffs still exist, even without the newest ones. So first is you consider using a bonded warehouse. Now, as a compliance tool, a bonded warehouse can delay duty payments and also provide some valuable flexibility for exporters that are managing international returns, inspections, or re-exports. But there are very specific procedures you need to follow, so you have to be careful with that. Something to note too is that Class 6 warehouses allow a company to manufacture or assemble products using those imported parts and then export the finished product without paying customs duties. Now you compare this to foreign trade zones, which usually have a very similar benefit, but at the moment have been excluded from the current tariffs. So they were having to charge the tariff as of the date that it entered the foreign trade zone instead. And so that wasn't quite as useful as a bonded warehouse for that application, but they're still worth looking at. Next up is you can review your Incoterms. So misunderstanding your Incoterms can not just affect logistics, but it can also shift export compliance and tariff liabilities. So you want to pay attention to what your Incoterms are, double check, and make sure that you're clarifying who is responsible for things such as those for your exports as well as your imports. Now, verifying classifications, we've discussed the fact that the export classification is the foundation for knowing what rules to follow. Now, when it comes to tariffs, your harmonized tariff schedule code for imports and your Schedule B code for exports are the foundations for tariff rates, as well as trade program eligibility, such as free trade agreements like with the USMCA, which was formerly NAFTA, or the exclusions that could be presented, such as those Section 301 exclusions that were in effect before. And on a note of country of origin, I just want to remind you that shipping from a different country or simply repackaging your product in a different country doesn't actually change your country of origin. So you can double check your classifications, but I caution you to make sure you're paying attention because you can't just change them to avoid tariffs. If you are changing a classification that you have been using, there must be a very reasoned basis and methodical process before you get into that. So you have to make sure you're documenting it very carefully, what it is that your determination is, and then you have to stick with it. No matter what changes come in the future, you have determined that that is your classification, and there's a reason for that. There's also some special provisions under Chapter 98 of the Harmonized Tariff Schedule, so that's for importers. And that can be used for partially or even fully avoiding some duties and remedying some tariffs on numerous products based on their use or conditions. So a couple of examples for that are products that are exported from the US and then later returned, regardless of their country of origin, are exempt from import duties under the heading 9801. And then in the value of US components that are in a product that's assembled abroad can be deducted from the total dutiable value of that good when it's imported into the country if you're using heading 9802. And finally, drawbacks can be a powerful way for you to recover money on duties that you've already paid. Now, it doesn't stop you from expensing them in the first place, but it does help you get some of that money back. And that is for if you import goods into the US and then later export those or destroy those same goods, they can be eligible for a refund of up to 99% of those duties, taxes, and fees that you pay to import. So this applies to goods that are either in their original form or after being used in manufacturing. So like when you import the components and you use it in your product, that is later exported. You're able to use that duty drawback. You just need to make sure you're paying attention again and doing very detailed record keeping for this and also submitting that claim in a timely manner. So that can be used correctly in a great way as a strategic cost-saving tool for your global operations. And now that we have you thinking about money, we will go ahead and welcome our presenter from the EXIM Bank.
Thank you
So
for the
I'll let you
introduction. Oh, sorry. Thank you
go
for the
for it.
introduction. And I just wanted to thank IDEC and also Sarah, Randy, and Jennifer for the invitation and having me this morning. It's a pleasure to be in here. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. For those of you that don't know EXIM Bank, we are the official export credit agency or ECA of the US government. Every country has their own version of ACAs. They all support their exporters by offering government trade finance programs or ECA financing. Our mission is all about American jobs by facilitating U.S. exports, and we do that by providing needed export trade finance solutions. Next slide, please. EXIM's export financing program facilitated support for U.S. exports through four major programs: export credit insurance, working capital loan guarantees, and direct loans. If I may highlight one solution in this slide today, here at EXIM, export credit insurance or ECI is the most popular trade finance solution to help American businesses manage their payment risk. It is an insurance policy to protect against the risk of international customer defaulting on a payment obligation, it works as a risk mitigation tool or sleep insurance. Next slide, please. These are the 4 special initiatives that we're currently focusing on, but I like to point out one domestic financing solution today. It's called the Make More in America initiative. This is our first domestic solution to complement our existing export trade finance programs. Now we have a full cycle of export trade financing, and this kind of complement that. And we do this by providing a direct loan as of today to incentivize American businesses to bring manufacturing back on shore here in the United States. So it's available for export-oriented domestic manufacturing facilities and infrastructure projects. So if you're interested in creating jobs through manufacturing, what we ask is to export 25% or 50% if you're small businesses. The revenues come from exporting. Next slide, please. Just to recap, if you face any of these situations, you'll have our attention. Next slide, please. Here is my contact. Please feel free to reach out if you have any questions. Looking forward to discussing your export journey soon. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you, Mitsu, for the overview. I think as Sarah put it earlier, he gave you some more tools so you can say yes to those international sales. I'm Jennifer Verdon. I'm the acting director for the U.S. Commercial Service, and I also represent the Rural Export Center, and I cover the Pacific North for the Rural Export Center. For the U.S. Commercial Service, I serve Idaho clients. The U.S. Commercial Service falls under the U.S. Department of Commerce, and we have a variety of services to support U.S. companies that are starting their export journey or that have already started and they already have international sales. We have offices throughout the entire U.S., so if we have some people on here that are not located in Idaho, I am more than happy to connect you after the webinar with representatives in your state. And then we have my colleagues are also spread all over the globe. So I have on the ground folks that can help you through the U.S. embassies and consulates overseas. I really would like to encourage you to check out our website, trade.gov, which has a lot of free resources available for all kinds of topics, and especially as we're talking about export compliance today, you can find a lot of free resources on export compliance as well on our website. Some of our bread and butter assistance that we can provide to U.S. clients is really our matchmaking services. Usually starts with some export counseling with your local representative, which in Idaho, that would be me. And then we would work with you to really understand what your sales process is and help you connect with potential buyers overseas. Usually that's dealers, distributors, wholesalers, through those offices that I mentioned in our international markets. Matchmaking also happens at events. So a lot of our matchmaking is kind of on an individual basis, but we do represent at international trade shows. We organize trade missions. We organize something that's called trade winds, which in essence is like trade missions. So it's always a good idea to reach out to your local representative when you are planning for an international trip, so we can talk you through what options we have available in terms of matchmaking. Furthermore, we can also, if you are a company that is either exploring or already selling to foreign governments, or even if you know governments are your customers, we can engage with you in a service called advocacy, where we can support you in selling to foreign governments. We do that in a variety of ways. It can be meetings between key foreign decision makers and high-ranking U.S. government officials. It can be something as easy as letters to decision makers in foreign governments. But what I really would like to encourage you to do is, as soon as you learn of a bidding process that you would like to engage in foreign markets for foreign contracts, that you engage with us, because there's some vetting involved on our end, and it's just a little bit of a longer process, but a very successful service. And then I'll wrap up kind of the conversation about the assistance that we have available by mentioning the Rural Export Center one more time. If you are a company that is still kind of in the exploratory stage, you are still trying to figure out where your best prospects are, what your best markets are, we have some phenomenal research tools available for you to really understand where you should be putting your efforts and your time in international markets. And next up, we have a little testimonial success story from a company called Black Sage Tech. Dirk Manley, who previously worked for Black Sage, was so kind to provide some commentary for us. He is traveling in Europe, and I hope he's having a lot of fun. But he was so kind to provide us with some background on why he has found being knowledgeable on export compliance has come in really handy for the company that he worked for many years, Black Sage Tech. So I'll kind of go through them and hopefully I'll do it justice. He started out with saying, not with that attitude, which by that he means, yes, you can export your products. There will be some hoops you need to jump through, but in the end, the result will be well worth it. Find the resources, and you've now heard about a multitude of resources that you can engage with. You know, Sarah, there's consultants, there's the Idaho District Export Council, there's your local governments like the Idaho Department of Commerce, and of course the federal resources that I just mentioned. So please tap in to those resources and ask for help. Prepare for the what ifs. Plan all the way to the end, know and state your end goal, and then create a plan of action. You know, kind of thinking about, we will cross that bridge when we get there. That's the kind of attitude that will likely create chaos for you. Also, don't make assumptions. You will be wrong, and being wrong costs a lot of time and money. So getting it right from the get-go will save you, obviously, on time and money. Create a process and checklist. Sarah kind of went over that really nicely. Checklists will keep you organized. A written process will help when the government comes knocking. And I should mention, I will not come knocking because I'm not a regulatory agency. But, you know, Sarah kind of went over that, what could happen if you don't have your checklist in order. And then be selective. Focus on what you do well. And in the end, customers, markets, will show that they have a need for you and your budget and your timeline. So thanks to Dirk for providing those bullets to us. And I will now kick it over to Ken Kohler. He's the CEO and COO for Advanced Ceramic Fibers, who has his own experience with export compliance and has worked closely with Sarah on this.
Yes, good day. I apologize up front for my voice. I just had some thyroid surgery recently. But anyway, I'm a real neophyte in this. Our company is a relatively young company. We've never been selling much in the way overseas. And when we began getting interest from foreign companies for our materials, I had no idea how to go about it. And long story short, we contacted the Idaho Department of Commerce and then also the Commercial Service, and they referred me over to Sarah, who had just started her own business in helping people and small companies like ours in preparing our documentation for export controls, export activities, and also the additional complex part of this that included some of our materials that we have in our company are ITAR restricted. So that was an even more difficult factor to pile on when we were going through this. So the worst case that any business manager can have, especially the CEO, is when you don't know what you don't know. And I didn't know a damn thing, quite frankly. So it was very helpful. Excuse my French, especially to you, Sarah. So I had to reach out to get support from somebody who could walk me through this. And so Sarah was extremely helpful And we were able to go through that whole process with the ITAR review and the year and the ECCN. And now at least I know what I don't know. And I'm still a neophyte, but there are resources out there that I would refer you folks to if you're new at this. What you just heard today is too much for most normal people to comprehend, but you at least have been provided names and contact information for people who can help you. And I would strongly recommend that you doing exactly that, because the consequences of doing it wrong are not, in my mind, acceptable. So, you just have to be patient as you go through this and document things as best you can, and use the contact information with people like Sarah, who you can refer to from time to time to give you good advice and get you started. So we had a very successful export to a company in France, and we were very successful in identifying whether this product fell under the ITAR restriction or not. In this case, it did not. So, but we are very much aware of these types of restrictions. And I can tell you, we had a visit from NCIS about 6 months ago, and they were, I guess, checking on websites and communications that are occurring relative to your web address and so forth. And they knew that our company, Advanced Ceramic Fibers, did in fact fabricate ITAR restricted materials. And they made it a point to travel here. There were two of them, one from the investigative service, one from NCIS. They weren't here to badger me. They were here to say, look, we're a resource. If you need it, we can help. So you guys have done the right thing so far, contacting right people. You now have another resource for checking to see whether certain customers or potential customers could give you trouble or not. And they also helped with our website by excluding all Chinese visitors to our website, and they're all rejected because we did have some information on our website that could have been bad in the wrong hands. So I'm going to quit now, but just to emphasize the point that there's lots of resources available in Idaho, and there's some personal resources. I can't say so much more than enough about the work, the support I got from Sarah. We were able to put together an ITAR program plan that we're constantly updating, obviously, but we're a heck of a lot further ahead and prepared for going into these markets. So, Sarah, I'm thanking you publicly for your support, and I'm thanking the Idaho Department of Commerce and the Commercial Service for the support that you all provided as well. So thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Ken. Okay, so next up, as you can see, export compliance is an important part of exporting. But when you know how to implement it correctly, it can be a strong strategic advantage, and you're able to say yes more often and with confidence that you won't get into trouble, damage your reputation, get fined, or worse, go to jail. So As we go into these last few details, I wanted to remind you to drop any questions that you have into the Q&A section. We're not going to have really much time like I'd hoped for, but what we can do is we can take those questions and give them to our experts, and hopefully they can reach out to you directly to answer some of those questions that you might have. So still please drop your stuff into the Q&A. Again, into the Q&A section, not the chat for these, but into the Q&A. And you can also, again, vote for the ones that you're most interested in seeing answered. So again, as I mentioned before, I want you to walk away with some resources. And so I'm going to share with you some key points that the government expects every exporter to have in an export compliance program. But if you want to grab your phone and scan this QR code here, you can download our complimentary export compliance program self-evaluation checklist. And on that checklist is an additional surprise bonus gift for you that I mentioned at the beginning. It gives you access to a complimentary consultation from yours truly. So go scan that QR code, download that checklist, and then you can move on to scheduling an appointment with me as well. So for the items that the government wants to see, first up is clearly documented determinations for your products. We talked about jurisdiction and classification codes, and they want to know that you have done your due diligence and not just taken 10 minutes and said, yeah, that sounds good. They want written policies and step-by-step procedures for export operations by department, not just really high-level stuff, but actually step-by-step. And then export compliance for all training, all employees. So basics for everybody, and then tier it up from there to the export compliance experts that need even more. You also need to do screenings of all your parties and their activities, as we talked about, as well as checks and safeguards throughout the export process, in the hopes that when you maybe miss a step towards the beginning, there's a check later that you notice that you didn't do that screening before it ships, and then you're able to catch that before it goes out. They also want you to do continuous monitoring of your systems. So doing internal audits, just your own systems, to make sure that you are actually complying and detecting if there's any problems. And then if you do detect a problem, you report it and put together corrective actions to make sure that that doesn't happen again. And then, of course, detailed record keeping practices. So those are all very important for export compliance programs, and you get more details on that checklist that I put up there. So the next set of resources is us, your expert speakers from today. And I know that we have people joining us from all across the country today. And so I'm also putting in here the websites in general for you to be able to find the local district export council, your U.S. Commercial Service contact, your EXIM Bank contact, and also you want to consider the Department of Commerce and the World Trade Centers if your state has one of those trade centers. Those are also good resources. You are not alone in this, and we all figure things out when something new comes out. And so it's good to leverage those connections and to work together. And so we're going to leave this slide up, and we're actually just out. So I don't know, Randy, you want to join me back here? Is there any key question that you feel like we should answer before we close out today?
I think, Sarah, that we're out of time, which is disappointing on that aspect, but really exciting because I think that it was such a great agenda. We're getting some good comments in the chat. I don't know that there is a question that would be a short, quick answer. So I think that being able to look at them and get back with everyone with those would be great. And thank you so much, Sarah. I really appreciate the information that's been shared. I think it was an excellent format, and I'm sure that everybody would agree that all of this is helpful information so that we can get out and really make sure that we're exporting right and doing our due diligence. So thank you so much for your time and all of this. And thanks for all the presenters. It's been a fantastic webinar.
Yeah, and thank you very much. And for the audience, if you are interested in a copy of this presentation, please shoot me an email. I just changed my contact information. There you go, sarah@smassey.com. Just shoot me an email and I can send you a copy of the presentation as well.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you, everybody.